joining.
We are so excited to kick off this session. I don't know if I know everyone. I'm Meggie. Nice to meet y'all. It's a delight to be hosting tonight's session with Becca. We're super excited to talk all things salary negotiation, right, Becca?
Yeah, for sure. I've gotten so many questions, especially this week with me accepting a new job, and everyone's asking, how do we negotiate? What do I do? What do you say? So I feel like it's just perfect timing.
Yeah, this is amazing. I would love to know who's in the room slash Zoom with us. If you want to just pop your name in the chat and maybe where you're joining us from. I'm in New York and it's rainy and stormy outside.
Me too. The lightning keeps going. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, it is super wild. It is super wild. Um, but listen, I don't know, should we kick things off, Becca? Why don't you introduce yourself for those of you who don't know you, and then I can do the same, and then we can jump into it.
Sure, sounds good. So, hello everyone. I'm Becca. I am also known as Blonde Broken Bougie. I am a personal finance creator. I consider myself a personal finance brand, but I love to share content around personal finance, especially for millennial, Gen Z women, people who are often left out of the personal finance space, I find. And I'm all about balance, making sure that you are still enjoying your life, that you're not just totally restricting yourself, and but also taking into account your financial future. So that's what I focus on. And I'm, in New York City as well.
Very cool, very cool. And hi, y'all. It's so nice to meet everyone. My name's Maggie. I am an Australian, hence my weird accent, but I do live here in New York City, and I founded a company called PepTalkHer. We have a free app, and it's all about closing the gender pay gap. That's my mission. I used to be a foreign correspondent. That was my job. I spent 15 years as a journalist, had an experience of pay inequality myself. It really pissed me off. And so now I'm on a mission to make sure it doesn't happen to other people. So that's my story. So I'm just stoked to be here today, and we are gonna with Pep Talker, we have about 60,000 women in our community. I reckon over the past 4 or 5 years, Becca, I reckon I've probably coached slash run sessions or trained or spoken to maybe 200,000 plus women, specifically around how to get a raise, how to get a promotion, how to kind of have these conversations at work about money without feeling super awkward and uncomfortable. Fun fact, the biggest raise I ever helped someone negotiate was $103,000. So that doesn't happen for everyone, but it is possible. And that happened during COVID too. So
That's crazy. Yeah, I
yeah.
know when we've spoken in the past, I've always, left feeling very inspired by you. So I'm just very excited that we're doing this together. So,
And likewise. So we've got I'm loving this. I'm loving hearing where there's lots of us in New York in the rain today. Hi to Boston, Providence. We've got a few Canadians here. Oh, Florida. How nice and sunny for you. How fun. This is cool. So listen, if anyone's got questions, Becca and I just thought we'd kind of have a chat. And we'll just kind of talk through our experiences. And then Becca, I'm happy to take any questions. I'm a pretty open book. So we'll just get people to put it in the chat, right? Let us know with any questions that you have in the chat. And we're going to get to as many of them as we can.
Yeah, works for me. And I know I've been kind of fielding all those questions, so I can ask anything that's been asked to me over the past couple of days. Everyone wants to know what happened with my job search, so I held off because I wanted you to talk as the expert.
Well, do we want to start with that? Talk me through, how did you feel about the negotiation process with your new job? Were you anxious about it?
That's a good question. I was in a weird position where right off the bat, recruiter call, the first thing that happens in the interview process most of the times, they asked me for my range, and I went in very confidently with the range that I wanted. And they basically said, the range we're thinking is a lot lower than this. And then we didn't really talk about it for most of the interview process after that. And it was a new role that they were establishing. So for me, I knew that there was flexibility because of that, it could go up a level. Maybe that was the range for someone with less experience, but I'm coming in with a little bit more experience than was in the job description. So maybe they can go up. And so I always knew I was going to negotiate when we got to the end, especially knowing that the range that they said in the beginning was less than I wanted. And I feel like you're going to tell me I did stuff wrong at the end of this, but But yeah,
No,
so like
not at all.
when they presented their offer, they essentially came with the top of their range, which was still a discrepancy from the bottom of the range that I had given them. And I said, I basically just stuck to my guns and I said, like, this is the range that I was thinking, like, as I mentioned on our initial call, and I was hoping that we could get there, and I'm flexible about how we get there. It doesn't have to all be in cash. Like, it can be in this or in that or whatever else however we make it work. Like, let's like work together to figure out how we can combine the tools that you have to get me to the number that I want. And so we ended up coming up a good bit. But I mean, I definitely did have some anxiety about it. Like, I knew what I was asking for was justified. So it was more just like, what are they going to say? Are they going to say no? And like, and then what happened?
Yeah.
Like that sort of thing.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Like when you've gone through the interviewing process to the point where they really want you,
Yeah.
like, and it's like at that point it'd be a waste of their time to sort of, rescind the offer or go to someone else for the sake of a couple of grand.
Yeah.
So when you know that someone really wants you, that's what we call leverage, right? So you have more ability at that point to kind of play a little harder ball because you've kind of got that power back. But there's definitely no right or wrong to negotiation, right? And every negotiation is different because I kind of like to think of it like a recipe, like a negotiation is kind of like a recipe. And it's like, just like every time you make spaghetti bolognese, like it's different every time, right? Like there's similarities, but it's always different depending on the ingredients. And so depending on the situation that you're negotiating, depending on how much preparation you do in advance, all those kinds of things depends on the outcome of the negotiation and how you approach it. But what I love, Becca, about what you did is you talked about how their offer was at below the lower end of your range. And I want to talk about the range tonight because that's really important, being really clear on what those numbers are. So we can chat about that in a second too, but we've got lots of really cool questions coming through, which is awesome.
Sorry, I'm just trying to plug in my light because it's getting kind of dark in here. So
Yeah, well,
there we
it's like,
go.
I know it's like 8 p.m.
It's a lot brighter once this is on. There we go.
There's some good questions here. Maybe we should chat about this, Becca. There's a couple of questions here about like talking about the number and the range, right? That you'd come up with. You've just been through a negotiation just recently, right? Let's talk about how did you come up with that number? And then I want to kind of give the people in the chat who are asking questions, I'll give some ideas and some tips for some other things you can do as well.
Yeah. I don't know if I went about the most scientific way, but the job that I took is in a specific field where it's not really something you can just like type into Glassdoor and have a million results come up. So I know that's like a really common tool that a lot of people use, but it wasn't something that was super easy for me to use. Something that I did instead was some people might know this. There's a law in Colorado that basically states that you have to put a minimum job salary or like some salary number in your job description. So I found as many job descriptions as I could out there in the world that were similar to the job that I wanted. And I looked and tried to find the ones that had Colorado minimum salaries listed. And so a lot of like big tech companies that are recruiting all over the country have these these national job descriptions, and I could see what the Colorado number is. And I obviously live in New York, so then I'm doing some adjusting to reflect the cost of living, but that was my main data point. I also know how much I currently make, and so I could expand if I were to get a raise. What would that look like? It's a similar role, and I obviously want to try to get more in a situation where I'm changing jobs, but those were my biggest tools, kind of referencing my current salary and what it would look like in the future, and then also finding that Colorado.
That's so smart, and Nikki agrees with you. That's an amazing thing to do. Absolutely. I'm going to send you all. This is another really cheeky thing that you can do to get access. I'm going to send you a link where you can actually search it. So there is a visa in the United States called the H-1B visa. And basically employers can sponsor people from other countries to come into the United States on that visa. And all of that salary data is public, and you can actually search that. So you can search like Google, Walmart, Amazon, whoever it is. You can literally search like for different job titles, different cities to kind of get a sense of what are they paying. And that it's up to date. because it's literally like what they have to submit on the visa form. So it's like here and now data as well. So that's another really good hack. I'm going to put the link to that. That's a really good cheat that you should hold on to. I'm going to put that in the chat. The other thing you can do as well, Becca, is like talk to recruiters. So you can call a recruiter, right? Because recruiters need people to place them into jobs. So they're quite open to you reaching out to them on LinkedIn or via email or whatever and having a conversation, being like, hey, this is where I am in my career. This is what I've done since college, blah, 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 whatever the case may be. And they'll be able to give you a range of what your value is in market right now as well. So that's another really good hack, is talking to recruiters. And you should call a recruiter at least once a year. It's really good practice to get into.
Yeah, that's super helpful. That visa, I never knew that would be public information.
Yeah, crazy, right?
Yeah, that's crazy.
I'm gonna put the link in for us. Yeah.
Do you know if there's any sort of like, I don't know if it's like illegal for them to offer like a lower salary because they're sponsoring them, like because they have maybe an extra cost associated with that, or does that factor in at all?
So I mean, there is legislation that says that you can't be paid differently to your colleagues because of your gender, because of a disability, because of your sexuality or orientation, right? Like that is in legislation. So in theory, men and women can't be paid differently for doing the same job, for example. But we know, and I've experienced this myself, we know that it does happen, because the only way that you would ever know is if, you know, your colleagues shared what they earn with you, right? If there was full transparency, that's the only way you'd ever figure it out. And we know that there is a gender pay gap as well, of course, in the United States, unfortunately, and that gap is actually a lot worse for women of color. So when it comes to being sponsored for visas, what you find is often when people need a visa, they feel like they don't have as much leverage to negotiate on things like bonus or title or, you know, their salary compensation. As to whether it's illegal or not, you know, I think that's a bit of a gray area. At that point, it's really up to the employee to decide whether or not they want to accept the offer on the basis of the terms that are set to them by the company. But it's something to keep in mind. And a lot of my clients actually, they are on visas. And so they say, I'll often hear them say, oh, I don't want to push too hard because of my visa and all that kind of stuff. And listen, all those things are genuine factors. But the other thing is to remember is that like you are awesome, you know, and you have so much value to bring. And like no one else can compete with you, Becca, or with Meredith or Holly or Lacey. Like all of us or me, like we all bring different experience. Some of you are better than me at some things and I'm better than you at some things. And that's just the way it is, right? And so you've got to walk into those conversations with the confidence, knowing I totally hit my targets. I increased our email opens. I've grown our social media following. I started an intern program. Whatever it is, whatever you do in your job, keep track of that so that when you go into those conversations,
Oh, we lost you.
I jumped onto mute. You've got to keep that data. You've got to keep track of the data and your achievements, because then that way you can use that to leverage for a raise or a negotiation. So rather than saying, hey, Sally, it's December, it's my performance review, I've done a good job, I'd really like $5,000 more, please. You can totally do that and it's fine. But it's much stronger if you walk in and you say, hey, Sally, as you know, I've exceeded my sales targets this year. I'm now managing 4 people on my team instead of the 1 when I started this role. I'm really proud that I've been organizing the team, book club during COVID to just really grow the culture within the business. And, you know, the clients love me and I've been able to retain every single one of my clients. With that in mind, I'd love to have a conversation with you to talk about my compensation going forward. I want to make sure that it's commensurate with the value that I'm bringing to the business at the moment. So you can see how they're like 2 totally different interactions.
Yeah, for sure. That's good to know. I know in the past, something that I've done is I have a folder in my inbox that's called Keep. And anytime I get like a kudos email, I just file it over there because I'm like, just in case I need to, you know, have some evidence or even just to psych myself up to be like, oh yeah, this person said I did that really well. I put it in my little Keep folder, and I actually looked back on it. It was my last day of work yesterday, and I went back just to like go through the folder and remember and say like, I can take this with me, you know, at least mentally to my next role.
And like, that's so smart. And when I was starting PepTalker 5 years ago, I was like, we surveyed a bunch of women and only about 15% of people that we surveyed did what you do, right? So keeping that kind of brag book email folder or whatever. And so that's why we built the PepTalkHer app, is for that exact reason, Becca, because like you've got to be able to like quickly and easily like keep track of those successes in one place. And so the app actually sends you a prompt every week to be like, Becca, what's up? What are you really proud of this week? And you can be like, I finished the job and like, got this lovely email from my boss, and you can screenshot it and actually upload it to the app. So then everything's in the one place, no matter how many times you change jobs. But yeah, like keeping a record of those kudos emails or pieces of feedback is so crucial, because you can use that on your LinkedIn. You can use it on your resume. You can use it in job interviews. It becomes like something that you can kind of repurpose in so many different ways, which is awesome.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I've done that for the past, 5 years, but it was a later habit. We're making slow improvements.
Right. So we've got a question here. Should we take some questions? What do you reckon?
Yeah. I was just scrolling through. I see we have a bunch.
Ooh, cool. Celia's got a cool question, which is like, what's the best way to ask for a raise or a promotion? They've set goals and they've accomplished the goals, and you're about to hit the 1 year mark. And someone else just left. So Cecilia thinks she's more valuable than ever. Yes, you are, right? Because companies, and especially bosses, they don't want to be the boss where everyone leaves, because that starts to paint a bad picture to their managers above them, right? Because it's like, well, hang on, why is everyone quitting? Is it about the people quitting, or is it about you being a bad manager? So it sounds like you do definitely have some leverage there, and you're coming up to your 1 year anniversary. You should be asking for a raise every single year. Like I had a client recently and she said to me, I can't ask for a raise. And I was like, oh, why not? She's like, oh, because I did that and they said no. And I was like, oh, when did you ask? And she's like, oh, I asked 6 years ago. And she never asked for a raise ever since, right? And so as you know from the content that Becca talks about, right, like with inflation and the price of living, the cost of living goes up every year because of inflation. So she didn't get a raise for 6 years. So she was pretty much sliding backwards because she didn't ask the question. So you've got to ask the question. You've got to be a high performer to start with. You've got to believe in yourself and have that confidence of knowing the value that you bring, but you've got to ask the question, because if you don't ask, you won't get. And sometimes they'll say no. They might say, oh, COVID, the recession, it's really tough. And you can say, listen, I completely understand. Why don't we circle back in 6 months and we can revisit this conversation? Right? So, because things change, and maybe by that point the company's pivoted and things are heaps better, so jump into the driver's seat of your own career and make sure that you're steering these conversations where you want them to go as well. Yeah, so I think that that's something that's really important to remember, to ask for that raise every single year.
I like to live my life just in general with the motto of what's the worst they can do? Say no.
Mm-hmm.
Even like when I was negotiating to get some like money back on my couch that was delivered late, everyone's like, well, what did you do? Like, how did you know to do that? And it's because I'm always just thinking, I'm going to ask, and the worst that happens is they say no. They're not going to cancel my couch order because I'm asking for some money back because
Right.
it's late. Like the worst that happens is they say no. So I think it's always worth it to ask. And you make a great point about inflation as well. Every year you don't get a raise, like cost of living raises are a thing because the cost of living goes up. If you're not getting a raise, everything around you is becoming more expensive. You're essentially your salary is decreasing.
Totally. And I actually had a letter. This is an interesting story. I had a letter in the mail. I opened my mail today. I hadn't really checked the mailbox for maybe like 7 or 8 days. I opened my mail and there's this letter literally from the IRS, from the tax department, being like, you owe this amount of money. Why haven't you paid it? And I was like, but I did pay it. I always pay my taxes. And I was like, yeah, I paid it. And so I had my accountant ring the IRS to ask the question. And they were like, oh, we categorized it wrong. But like I had to ask the question, because imagine if I had just paid the tax twice, then I would have had to like fought to get it back. But like always ask the question, because maybe it was a mistake. Like it could have been possible that I'd made a mistake. Don't get me wrong, but ask the question and question everything, right? Because otherwise you can get yourself into situations where you're just believing everything and not questioning, right? So
Totally. And medical bills is another one where that happens a ton.
always negotiate your medical bills. Always, 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 always. The worst that they will say is no. And normally, like you have pretty good success with this, right, Becca?
Yeah, I don't know that I've had success negotiating. I don't think I've had a large enough bill. And you're probably gonna yell at me and say even if it's small, I should negotiate. But I've definitely had luck where it's things are coded wrong or I'm being double billed for something. So I'm
Yeah.
always double checking everything to make sure, you
Yeah.
know, the claim and the invoice and everything matches up and what
Yeah.
I paid. That's where they get to. I think
Yeah.
it's intentional, but they get you that way.
It's not a great system, is it? It's very stressful, medical system. Yeah, it's not
Sure.
great. Okay. I'm
Yeah,
just
a
putting
lot of
my
questions.
so many questions. This is amazing. Um, okay. Great questions here. What happens when you accept an offer and then you're working your booty off and you feel like you should have been on more? So Moira's got a great question here, and thanks for asking those questions on Instagram as well. Yeah, so sometimes people find themselves, they don't negotiate, they forget to negotiate, they come to this session like a week after they sign their contract. That's okay, because it's better that you're here now than never knowing about it, right? So we're so delighted that all of you are investing in yourself by being here at this session today. So what you can do is it's pretty tough, I think, to ask for a raise in the first 3 months. I had a staff member once, she literally asked me for a raise on day 2. And I respect the chutzpah, but I was like, this is kind of awkward. We literally just agreed on that contract 2 days ago. This is weird. So I feel like 3 months is kind of, you get your feet under the table, you sort of prove yourself, all that kind of stuff. Typically, you would not normally see raises being offered or granted anything earlier than 6 months. In fact, it's normally 12 months, but if your performance is like massively exceptional, if you sign $1 million deal in your first month, like if wild things happen and if lots of people leave and all of a sudden you're doing higher duties, of course. But otherwise, the thing with negotiating is like, yes, with your salary, you want to get more money, 100%. But the other thing you need to remember is that there's a long game at play, right? So it's not just like your salary this year, because you might be at this company for 2 or 3 years, maybe 10 years, who knows? So you don't want to kind of like totally screw your boss or your employer out of every single thing in the first negotiation, because it can leave a bit of a bad taste in their mouth, right? And so some of us, when we're thinking about negotiations, sometimes we think of it as like a fight, but actually, like, I just want to show you something. When you look at the definition of negotiation, right? Like the technical definition of what it is, it's really a discussion. It's not an argument. You're not walking into a war zone. It's not a fight. It's actually just a discussion. And the goal is an agreement. You want a salary, they want you, right? Like the company where Becca's going, they really wanted her because she's awesome. She wanted the job and she wanted to get paid fairly for that. And so there's kind of got to be this meeting, right, in the middle to find that agreement. And so Becca could have gone in there and said, I want 7 figures and I want this and I want that. And then like it's not necessarily approaching it with the way that you intend to continue. So again, it's like the person who negotiated with me on day 2 asking for more money. It's just a bit awkward because I was like, I don't know if I can trust your word, because we shook on an agreement and we said we would revisit it after 3 months and it's been 48 hours. This is a bit uncomfortable. So keep that in mind when you're trying to decide. If things change and all of a sudden you were supposed to be managing 1 person, now you're managing 10 or 5, you were supposed to be in New York City, now you have a global role, of course, there are situations where it warrants it. But other than that, I would typically say not before 6 to 12 months. And before 12 months, there would have to be a very good reason. So if you can articulate that, and if you can say, listen, I introduced savings within the business that have saved you $40,000 already in cloud computing costs or in email software costs. If you can prove that, it's a bit of a different story. But if you're just saying, well, I'm working really hard, your boss is going to go, yeah, but like, of course you're working hard because that's the expectation of our company. So you got to be able to put dollars and cents and like statistics and be able to prove the exact impact. And if you can do that, it's a lot easier to advocate for more money.
Something that I heard recently, it was from Babe on a Budget blog, if you follow her.
Yeah, she's great.
She said a good time to ask for a raise. It's like the same thing as enrolling in health insurance. There's open enrollment once a year. If there's a qualifying event, then you can ask sometime during the year. So I liked that. I thought that was a good metaphor.
I am obsessed with that. That's the best description I've ever heard. Yeah, there's an open enrollment period. And typically your company will have like an annual review time frame, right? Like, maybe it's quarterly reviews, maybe there's once a year, whatever it is. And so that is the best time. But again, if there's a qualifying life event, then of course it's open slather. Yeah, that's an amazing analogy.
I know, I thought that was great. We have some questions about what the range should be when a recruiter asks you for a range. I can say that I gave a $10,000 range. I don't know if that was good or if that was bad. And where should your ideal salary land within that range? I can tell you mine was the bottom of that range. If I got the bottom of that range, I would be exceptionally happy. That was my thought process going into it.
Yeah.
Tell me how I could have improved that.
Yeah, so I think, the range is a tough one, right? But if we want to put numbers on it, the range can sort of be anything from 10 to 15% of your salary. So, it might be if you're earning under $50,000, maybe the range is my expectation sits between 48,000 and 53,000. But I've got a client and she was negotiating this week and she's already earning, what she earned, 140, and she's getting a massive, massive promotion. And so her request was 240, but in her head, her range was 200 to 240. So I'll show you, there's a concept, like in any negotiation, it's important that you know your numbers, right? Like you've got to know what your numbers are. And I like to think of it as the WWW, the wish, the want, and the walk number. So your wish number is the number, Becca, if you said it out loud, you'd be like, oh my gosh, I can't even believe I just said that number. Like I feel sick, that's so much money. Like I couldn't even imagine. Like it's quite uncomfortable. And if there's a number that you're thinking of now, probably make it a bit higher. Like it needs to be a stretch number. And then your walk number is the bottom of the range where you're like, if that's all they offer, if that's their best offer, I'm out. Like, no, I'm worth more than that. I respect myself too much. I actually can't even live on that. So I'm not even going to accept the offer, right? And then your want number is somewhere in the middle where you're like, do you know what? That's actually a fair amount of money. Like, I feel like I would be really well compensated and I'm pretty happy to jump out of bed for that amount of cash. So you want to do your research. And this is the thing with salary negotiations, right? Like you kind of got to be a bit of a detective and you got to be like Becca and you got to kind of like look to the states where salaries are public and kind of like do a bit of sleuthing. You might ring some friends, see if you've got friends on LinkedIn who worked at that company who can give you a steer. I always suggest chatting to a white male about what they earn in a similar role because the statistics tell us that chances are they're earning more than you and I. So you should ask them for their advice. Of course, ask your girlfriends, but also ask guys as well. And you want to try and get as much of a picture as you can. Of course, the tip of the iceberg, everyone can go to salary.com and Glassdoor. That's easy. But what's beneath the iceberg? Not everyone knows about the H-1B visa website. Not everyone knows about the different states that have the different rules, right? Where you can access different salary data points. Not everyone knows to call a recruiter. So if you do heaps of awesome prep, the success of your negotiation is going to be a lot better because you're going to feel more confident, you've got more information to hand, and you're just going to get a better result, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So with that WWW method,
yeah,
where is the range that if a recruiter asked you, like, where do those numbers fit in that range?
So it's a tough one. So I'll give you an example. If a recruiter contacts you out of the blue, and if you're pretty happy where you are, and you don't really need or want a new job, if you're just like, I don't like, whatever, I would say to them something like this. I would tell them what you want without telling them what you want. So I'll explain. So I would say to them, hey, listen, thank you so much for reaching out. I'm really honored. I got to be honest with you. I'm really happy where I am right now, and I'm extremely well looked after. So you let me know what sort of a bump I'd be looking at. You come to me with a range and I'll consider whether I'll put in an application. Because you might think that you are crushing it on 62,000 and the recruiter might think, oh, she definitely want 80 to 90, 100%. Right? Like, so you don't know. And it's such an inexact science, which is so annoying. If you're at a startup, you're going to get less than if you're at a Fortune 500, but you might get equity and they could list on the stock exchange and then you become a millionaire overnight. There's all these different, if you work for a small business versus working for a company that has profit share, there's so many different variables. So if you don't really care, and if you're kind of willing to sort of put the ball back in their court, I'd say things like, listen, for me to move, it'd have to be a very attractive offer. So let me know what they're thinking, and then I'm happy to set up a call. So can you see how I haven't actually given them a range, But I've given them the perception, damn, she's a baller. Like she's pretty fly. Like, you're going to have to work hard to get her. And that's what you want them to think, because you want them to come back to you with a pretty sweet offer. You want them to say to the client, you're going to have to work hard to get her. Like, let's just give her the top of the range. That's the expectation that you want to give them. Now, that's if you're in a position of privilege and you don't really need the job. You're not desperate. If you've been unemployed for 6 to 12 months or longer, if you've been laid off, if you've got healthcare costs and you desperately need a job, it's a bit of a different story, right? Because you need that healthcare, so you need to sign on the dotted line ASAP. So it's very circumstantial. If you have to give a range, do your research first, so that you've been to all of the websites, you've done the deep dive, you've talked to friends, and then figure out your wish, your want, and your walk number. And the range that I would give them would sit between your want and your wish number. If you want to quantify it, anything from sort of 7 to 20 grand as a bit of a range. If you're in multiple six figures, sometimes that range is literally 50 grand, right? I've had clients and the recruiter has said, listen, the range sits between 140,000 to 400,000 based on your experience. So that's a massive range. And the recruiter gave him that range, right? So it is circumstantial. And I know that doesn't help when you're trying to just put a formula in place, but do your homework, get your wish, your want, and your walk number sorted, and then just split the difference between your wish and your want number. Because then even if you come down a little bit, you're still going to hopefully fall around that want number.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like I didn't do a horrible job with my negotiation.
It sounds like you crushed it. Like, snaps for you, by the way.
I think we're getting a lot of questions about raises and promotions, it seems like, as well. Let's see, we have a lot. Or actually, why don't we keep going on this topic, because there's a related question, and someone asked, how do you approach a negotiation if you've given a range and they basically come to the top of it right away? And I got this a lot on Instagram too, people saying, should I still negotiate if I've got exactly what I asked for at first?
Okay, so if they give you exactly what you want straight away, that's helpful information to know that you didn't ask for enough. Every employer expects to negotiate. Now, listen, there are some employers who will openly list the description, and they will say, this role is paying $72,000 plus 401k, or $72,000 plus benefits, and they will just list it. So some companies, they're pretty rare, honestly, it's less than 15%. I think it's like not a lot, where they're like, the number is the number is the number. But sometimes that's the case. I can give you an example. One of my friends, he's a founder of a beauty company. It's called Dibs Beauty. I'm obsessed with their stuff. It's so good. Anyway, he was telling me he was negotiating with someone the other day. They advertised a range. They went through the whole interview process. And then at the end, she asked for $100,000 more than the advertised, wage. And he was just like, he's like, I literally laughed. And he's like, I respect her for asking. There's no problem. But he's like, 100,000 more? Like, are you joking? Like, that was never going to happen. We advertised it very clearly. This is what we're paying. She agreed to that. And then to ask that, it put a bad taste in his mouth, So I think, again, you just got to kind of think that through. But if you say, listen, I would really love 58,000, and they said, done, let's sign the contract. Look, there was probably a bit of wriggle room that you could have gotten out of that, right? So next time, to kind of push a little bit higher, maybe your wish figure needs to go up a little. But at the same time, a quick deal is a good deal. Sometimes that's a good thing. The recruiter's like, okay, just get it done. So you never know. But again, I would, if you're ever unsure, ask them to steer you. Hey, listen, let me know, what have you budgeted for this role? What's the ballpark range you had in mind for this figure? Typically, what have you paid for someone with my amazing experience and seniority? Like, using phrases like that lets them give you a number. And then if they come in above your wish, you can be like, okay, that's interesting. Let me think about it, and I'll come back to you tomorrow. And then you can get off the call and go, yes, I'm so excited. So you can always buy yourself time if you need to as well. Okay, people are loving the H1B website. This is good. Oh my gosh, Gina literally just found out that someone in the same role is making 34K more.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, this is like, I feel like we're in like a detective show. This is amazing. This is like, okay, we're gonna have to, we got to unpack this. And actually, if people want to dive into this further, this is my jam, right? Like this is what we do day in, day out. Definitely download the app. I'll send you the link for the free app, but we also run a career challenge every quarter to support people, especially women, because of COVID and the disaster that it has been for women in the workforce. I'll put the link to the app in the chat. But we run a free career bootcamp as well. And it's funny, which I'll put the link in if you want to join, it's free. It just goes for 5 days, and I run a live coaching call kind of like this every day as well for people to ask live questions. And one of the challenges on one of the days is kind of stepping into your inner detective as part of this process. So Gina, you're just kind of like, you're our sort of test dummy for this one now. Okay, so if you find out that you are being paid significantly, well, less in any capacity, especially significantly less than someone who is doing the same roles and responsibilities as you are, potentially that is illegal. I don't want to say it is, because there are also sometimes if people have more years of experience, sometimes if they have a master's degree, sometimes they might be in a city that has a higher cost of living. So there are parameters that can sometimes account for some of that. If you are performing 4 out of 5 and they are performing 5 out of 5, that can impact it as well. So there's a lot of different factors at play. So, we've got to, don't jump to conclusions. However, if you do all your research and you think, this is fairly blatant, depending on the size of the company, if you work for a fairly large organization, you can probably find on the intranet a policy. There may actually be a policy around this in the employee handbook about processes. So you really at that point have 3 options. You can say nothing, you can talk to your manager, or you can talk to HR. Really, those are kind of the things that you can do. Some bosses get annoyed if you go to HR and don't go to them. So you got to weigh that up. And this is where you have to be kind of strategic and understand your boss's personality, the culture at the company, and all that kind of stuff. So Gina, I'm happy to chat to you offline about this as well. We can jump into the more nuance, but join the challenge next week, because we're actually going to talk about this in that challenge as well. But you are within your rights to say that. And also, if you are going for a new role that was maybe previously held by a man, and you want to make sure that you're paid commensurate, you can say things like, I'm really looking forward to this step up. Of course, I would expect that I would be paid at least, if not more, than my predecessor, given my experience and the value that I bring to the business. So you don't have to say, don't even think about me paying me less than John. You don't have to make it adversarial, but there's ways you can say it without saying it. Again, if that makes sense, it's kind of like, I know that of course the company will of course be paying me commensurate with the men in this role. Or, I know that I'm moving on to, a director level position. And of course, I want to just make sure that I'm paid equally to my other colleagues who are also at the same level with my level of experience. I'm sure that's the case. I just want to put it on the record that that's important to me. So you're just kind of putting them on notice a little bit without being aggressive or anything like that. But Gina, happy to chat to you about that offline. I'll put my LinkedIn, and you're all welcome to, definitely connect with Becca and I on LinkedIn. We would love to stay in touch as well. But lots of questions. We're going to try and get to as many of these as possible.
Scrolling through.
Yeah, Ali says, what do you do when they say they don't have a range? I sent a newsletter this week actually about how you need to shut up. Like sometimes we are our own worst enemy because we talk too much, or we say, listen, I'm so excited for the opportunity. I would love a salary of $60,000, but don't worry because, I'm only working 4 days a week, so you can pro-rata it down. And, I'm also happy to work extra long hours, and I'll do a 10-hour day for that. And, I'll pay for my own travel for conferences. And so sometimes we kind of negotiate with ourselves. We have to stop doing that. And this is why, I don't want any of you walking into a negotiation without having done a dry one with your best mate or your sister, your mum, your dad, your uncle. I don't care. Just call someone up and do a practice negotiation, because you'll get a bit of nerves and you might go a bit red, you might get a bit nervous, and that's cool, right? We want you to do that in a safe environment with your sister or your roommate or whoever, because it doesn't matter. And that means that when you go into the real deal, you're going to feel so much more confident, so much more calm because you've already been prepared, right, for a lot of these questions. So that's really, really helpful as well. I always recommend doing a dry run before.
Totally. I have to practice everything, so I relate to that.
There is no shame in practicing. Okay, so this is a really good question from Christine. She wants to know, like, how do you find the range in an industry shrouded in secrecy? Yeah. So sometimes you'll go to Glassdoor and it'll be like the typical range for a marketing manager is between $55,000 and $213,000. And you're like, what? Totally useless.
Somewhere in there.
And it's like, oh, you can't say to the recruiter, I'd like between 55 and 213. You tell me. Like, that's just ridiculous. So it sucks, Christine, but you gotta dig deep. You're gonna have to start having conversations about money with people, find out the organizations, the aid organizations that do publicly advertise their ranges, jump on Facebook groups, jump on forums, jump on Twitter. There's a couple of really famous Twitter streams where people openly talk about their salaries. There are a bunch of Google Sheets where people anonymously post their salary. Mentors are really good for this. As women, unfortunately, we are often raised to think about money differently from like guys, which is why the work that Becca does is so important. And so one of the things, and this is a little challenge that I might leave you all with to do, like you can do it tonight or tomorrow. I'll let you have the weekend, but I want you to talk about money this weekend. Like, not just like, oh, hey, how much is dinner? I mean, like, talk about your salary with someone. And you're probably like, some of you are hating me like right now. You're like, Meggie, no, that's so orcs. And it is super awkward, right? But you got to start getting used to it. And what you can do is, instead of saying to your best mate, hey, Jane, how much money do you make? I mean, you could, if it's your best mate, it's probably fine. But if it's like, a colleague at work, here's what you could say. You could say, hey, Hanya, I'm so excited. I'm going for a promotion. I was thinking that range for that salary position should probably sit between like 70 to 77. That's what I was thinking of asking. Does that sound about right to you? That means that Hanya can then say, yeah, if you can get 70, that'd be amazing. I was on 60 grand when I was doing that role. Or she might say, absolutely not. Do not accept anything less than 90,000. It kind of lets people, or they might just say, yeah, that sounds good. Or they might say, I don't know, but let's go talk to Adrian because like him and I are good mates and he'll probably tell me what, or if you know people in HR or in finance, they might be able to give you a bit of an idea of what people get paid. So it's very tough. And that's why salary transparency is actually very important, because it can counteract some of those challenges that Christine's talking about. Yeah. You got to be a detective though. And you have to do the preparation. And here's the thing about the gender pay gap. It totally sucks. And I hope that one day I am unemployed because it doesn't exist, right? Like I want to do myself out of a job. But the reality is that like the pace of change right now, it's going to take 100 to 200 years for that gap to close. And like, I just reckon that's complete bullshit. And I'm not going to wait around for that, right? And so if you can actually put in that work and do that heavy lifting, which you shouldn't have to do, and I know that it's unfair and I know that it's cumbersome, but if you can do that, you will probably get a slightly, if not much better result for yourself, right? And that is exciting for you now, but it's particularly exciting for you and your family in retirement too, because don't forget, as you know from Becca's work, like what you earn is important because you'll make a few extra grand this year, but in retirement, that adds up to an extra $50, $100, $150,000 when you retire. So it is actually very important to start to think about.
Yeah. And even for future career moves, if like, yes, you can save more now, but then you also can negotiate on your next career move and you have more negotiating power. And then that compounds every time, if you start your career at $100,000, you're going to have a head start versus starting at $50,000. So every move after that's going to be an extra increase.
Totally. And I think the other thing is like, sometimes your boss will say, we don't have any more money, or cash flow is tight right now, we can't pay you more. Sometimes they're bluffing, but honestly, sometimes it's true. And I run a business and like, sometimes that is the case. We don't always have more budget. And so again, you can get pissed off at that, or you can get creative, right? And so your job in a negotiation is to plan for roadblocks, because the reality is that they come up. People say no. People say not right now. People say maybe at Christmas, maybe at Thanksgiving. You know, that is going to happen. So you've got to plan for those roadblocks because they're going to happen. Like, let's be realistic. They're going to come up. And so what else can you ask for? What else is important to you? Money's great. So we want to maximize for money, right? We want to maximize for your equity. So if you get shares in a business, and we want to maximize for your bonus. Awesome. What else can you get? And Becca, I don't know, have you ever negotiated like non-monetary benefits?
I haven't. Well, I've only ever worked at an extremely large corporation, and Going is also a decently large company, and these things are pretty explicitly defined, is what I'll say. So I've never negotiated for anything outside of dollars and money.
So back when I used to be a foreign correspondent, I used to work in Australia, and then I worked in London for the BBC World. Sometimes there was no more money because journalism's kind of tough, right, with cash. So I would always maximize the cash. And then I love holidays, right? Love it. Love lying on a beach, love going horse riding, hiking, whatever. So they would be like, I would ask for my wish figure, like some ridiculous number. They couldn't give it to me. So they would offer me a number which normally was around my want. So I was like, yes. But I didn't let them know that. I was like, oh, that's disappointing. Okay. I wonder if we could talk about some extra annual leave. Would you be open to giving me an extra 2 weeks leave, and we just sort of do it off the book? So we don't put it through the HR system. You and I just have a handshake agreement that I will accept this salary, and it's not what I want it to be, but I'm happy to accept that amount of money on the proviso that I get an extra 2 weeks leave a year, or an extra 4 days, or whatever. And they said yes. So I actually got an extra 2 weeks, which was cool because they paid me while I was on holidays, right? Just perfect. So that's something you can do. One of my clients, her company pays for her pet insurance. So random, only in Silicon Valley, but that's something you can get a sign-on bonus, especially if they've poached you. Title, I've done this as well when I was working in New York City. When I was first moving here, and I was a consultant, they didn't have the budget I wanted, so I got a bigger title. Right. So they actually bumped up my title so that I felt special, and it was on my LinkedIn, and I kind of looked a little bit fancier and more senior than I actually was. Because that has value too, right? You can't pay your rent with it, but it has value for the sorts of jobs you get offered in future. You know, so think outside the square, and you've got to, again, this comes back to preparation. It's a bit tedious that you have to do it, but if you do all these things, it allows you to navigate those conversations and kind of like get more of what you want out of the situation, and be more likely for the other party to say yes to what you want. Sometimes they'll cover, like, sometimes you'll be able to get business class travel for flights more than 5 hours, or they might give you a parking spot, all sorts of different things. But we talk about that in the Performance Review Bootcamp as well. So we've got a whole bunch of different PDFs that we can send people on that too.
Awesome. Yeah. I when I was just negotiating, obviously, like, I feel like everyone's number one choice is to get more dollars. And I did the too much talking thing. And I was like, you know, however we can get there, you guys, if you want to give me more stocks, you know, and I like very much leaned into that. And I was very fortunate that in the negotiation, they actually did end up coming up on the dollars. But I do think that, you know, being quiet and letting them try to get there would have maybe been the smarter move. But if not, I think there is definitely opportunity to negotiate on the non-monetary pieces as well.
Definitely. And it's hard, you know, it's hard to, because you also, you know, if you pride yourself on someone who wants to be nice and get along with everyone, sometimes you can feel quite uncomfortable in that negotiating situation. Sometimes a lot of my clients say, I feel like a bitch. I feel like I'm being high maintenance. I feel bad. I feel guilty for asking. Like, you know, they're not a charity, and you might work in a not-for-profit. But even if you do work in a not-for-profit, you bring value, you know, and if you're working at a for-profit company, like, it is not a charity. You are not showing up out of the goodness of your heart. You are showing up because you get paid and you do good work. There's an exchange of value. And so you are within your rights to ask the question. You can ask it in a very nice way. You don't have to be aggressive. You don't have to be an asshole about it, right? You can be really polite and thoughtful. And we know that for women in particular, the language that we use is very important for the way that the other party perceives us. So as much as possible, framing things in the positive will actually go a very long way. So for example, let's say that I'm Becca, and a company comes to me and offers me a job. And let's say I said to them, listen, I'd really like to be paid 60,000. And they come back and say, listen, our final offer, we're so excited, our final offer is $57,000. I could say, that's not the figure I wanted. I'm not accepting that small amount of money. That's a response that I could say. Or something that would be more constructive would be if I said, thank you so much for the offer. I so appreciate this. And I'm really excited about the prospect of working for your business. So I'm framing it in a positive. And then I could say, I'd love to explore, is there anything we can do to push the compensation up closer to my expectations? So they're both giving the same message, but like if you can frame it in a way that makes you look like you're so solutions focused, you're so creative, you're working with them, you're just going to get a better result. And also reputationally, again, it sucks that we even have to think about this, but we know that we do as women in the workforce, like having that, setting that expectation with the relationship that you are, you will work with them, you're positive minded, you're solutions focused, rather than just being someone who's going to be like, nah, all the time. There's a time and a place. Sometimes you have to play hardball, and we can talk about that further in the challenge next week, but framing in the positive is really helpful too.
Yeah, I have a friend who's a recruiter. It's a woman, and she said that that a lot of the times candidates will say, like, how can we work together to make this happen? And she's like, it manipulates me every time. She's like, it works. Like saying something like, how can we work together to achieve this, or how can we get there, and like really framing it with the we working together thing. She's like, it really works on me.
The we, yeah, the collective we, totally. Like, and again, it's when women are perceived as negotiating collectively and with you, there's a bunch of research that's proven this, right? The results are better. And also like, and I was coaching, I take on a couple of one-on-one clients, and one of my clients, she works for a big bank. I was talking to her about this week. She was going in for a negotiation. And you don't have to do this, but she decided she would get her hair blow dried. She wore her favorite dress, and she's like, I felt amazing. She's like, I walked out of the elevator and I was like, yeah. She's like, I felt so good. And like, if you can make yourself feel good in the first place, you're going to be like ahead of the curve to start with. And then the other thing is positioning it. This is not about you, Becca, negotiating. It's not about me, Meggie, negotiating for me. I am negotiating for myself and my fiance. I am negotiating for my mum and dad who are in retirement. I'm negotiating for my very cute nephews and niece who I hope to be able to, take on amazing holidays in the future. I'm negotiating for my girlfriends for the, fact that I'll be able to shout more cocktails at the bar if I get a great salary. And I'm negotiating for the next generation of women, because I want to set an expectation that it is okay for me to ask for more. They can make a decision as to whether they say yes or no, but it's okay for me to ask. And I can ask that in a really lovely way that is very collegiate and polite, right? But if you frame it as, it's not just about you, you're negotiating for you and your dogs, for you and your best mate, for you and your roommate to be able to move to a better apartment. When you can frame it that way, sometimes that helps our mindset as well. Those little tweaks can make a big difference.
I feel like everyone is seeing now what I was saying, how last time we spoke that I left like inspired and like ready to do things.
So good.
Yeah, I mean that just it like literally makes me want to go get some more money somewhere. But
well, yeah. And I think there's a couple of people in the chat saying, I regret not negotiating. And it's kind of like investing. And Becca, I know you talk about this. It's like the best time to start investing was yesterday. And the next best time is today or tomorrow, right? Like it's like you can't dwell on the past, but you can learn from it and you can pay it forward to someone else. So my very first job in journalism, I didn't negotiate because I didn't know you had to. I didn't negotiate. So I accepted, I think it was like $28,000 or $27,000, whatever. I didn't negotiate. And because of that, statistically, I will probably retire with about $500,000 less when I retire than if I had negotiated. Because even if I had have asked for $2,000 or $3,000 more, the cumulative compounding impact of that, of my retirement, all of that kind of stuff is so great that it will add up to like $500,000. So if nothing else, like please pay this forward to your friends, your nieces, your sisters, whatever, and say to them, make sure you negotiate even the first salary. Even if they say no, it's like it's muscle memory. And if I wanted to go to the gym and get massive biceps, I'd go and do this every day. I'd be like douche, 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 and nothing would happen for a couple of days. And then slowly, and then after 6 or 12 months, I'd be huge. I'd be like this, I'd be massive. And it's the same when you think about like making it a habit and a practice of negotiating, asking the question. To Becca's point, ask the couch company if you can get a discount. Ring the IRS if they send you a notice saying you owe the money and you're a bit dubious about it. Ask the question. Sometimes you do have to pay it, and sometimes the couch company tells you to go away. But you're building that muscle memory of it's okay to ask, it's okay to ask, it's okay to ask, right? And that's really important too.
Totally. If I were to add up, all the money I got back by asking, like it's like $10 here and $100 here, but like it adds up, just the little things. It makes a huge difference.
Yeah, it truly does. It really, really does. And I want to put a link in. Becca, I'm such a fan of the work that she does, and I think it's so important for all of us to think about our financial future and like just get really serious about it. And I love that like you're so open about it and that you share your literal day-to-day journey. And I've learned so much from you, the cost per wear, and like starting to burn on my fancy candles, Becca, because I'm worth it. Why not? And so it's just such a delight to have this conversation and to meet you all. So I'm gonna take some more questions, but I do want to pop a link in the chat as well for the career challenge that happens next week. That's a partnership with Becca and I, and like it's free, and we would just so love to see you there. It would be such a treat. There's a couple of thousand people joining, and so we would love to see some of the blonde broken bougie ladies in there as well. You would be so welcome, and make sure you shout out and let us know that we all met in this session as well. There is a recording. I'm going to circulate that, probably give us an hour to get it onto YouTube after this, but we will send that to you as well. And of course, we can continue the conversation on Instagram. You can send me DMs, the @PepTalkHer account. I'll send you that link too. If you've got more questions as well. But Becca, there's a heap of questions that we could still go to. There's so many, right? I'm happy to keep answering.
We can keep going for sure, whatever you want to do. I do want to shout out as well. I'm going to shout myself out for my other boot camp. So this is a bonus boot camp. But if you are interested in learning more about personal finance, just before everybody signs off, I do want everyone to know you can still get the discounted price for the boot camp that I'm offering. It's like a personal finance basics course. It's supposed to last 7 weeks, but it is totally self-paced. You can do it as quickly or as slowly as you like, whatever works with your schedule. If you use code PepTalkHer, you'll get a little extra something. So you definitely can do that. And yeah, I just wanted to make sure everyone knew about that. And if you don't follow me and you have no idea what I'm talking about, feel free to reach out to me on Instagram, and I can do more explaining.
And the like Becca's stuff is so amazing. Becca, have you got the link that we can put in as well? I'm just trying to find the link because I think people will probably want to sign up for that. It's awesome. And it's like, investing in yourself is so valuable, because it's a relatively small investment now. It will literally change your life in future. Plus, it will make things easier because one of the things I love about Becca is it's like also about simplifying things. You don't have to overcomplicate stuff. You don't have to behave like a share trader buying and selling all the time. It doesn't have to be like that. And that's what I love about the way that you did demystify it, Becca. It's so valuable.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
This is in there as well.
This is a cool tip from Christine. She talks about how she can see everyone's day rates because she submits budgets to a client. So that's really cool too. So maybe you have a friend who's in advertising or marketing or the film industry who handles shoots, right? And so that's helpful too. You could always ask them if they have an understanding of different day rates as well. That is that's a really great tip as well. Less ideal that your assistant was making about the same amount of money as you, though. Sounds like you might need to ask for a raise, Christine. So many questions. Really, really cool. So Hannah makes a good point too. How do you bring up the salary conversation without making the other person feel like you're putting them on the spot? So what I would say to that, Hannah, is I think that's really thoughtful and compassionate of you, and I think that's the right attitude. People don't like to feel like they're on the back foot because then they will attack, they will hit back, because they're not prepared. But if there's a calendar invitation, if you sent them an email and said, hey, Hank, I'd love to catch up with you next month to talk about my progress so far and my compensation next year. I've just popped 20 minutes in the calendar, really looking forward to it. Hank then has 3 weeks, can see it in the agenda, can see it in the calendar to know that that's what's going to come up. There's nothing wrong with that, right? Hank might decline the invitation and say, no, we'll talk about that at December in the review period, okay? Potentially reasonable. If there's been a live event that changes things, you can push back on that. But I think that I do agree with you, like it's better to give people notice. Sometimes as well, if you have another job offer, that is one of the strongest times when you can negotiate because you have more leverage in that situation. There's a couple of people, Becca, as well in the community who've just been saying that like the other thing for them is that they have been at a company for ages. They don't get very many raises and they know that the company's hiring people at higher levels than them, even though they have the same experience. You can definitely have a frank conversation with your manager about that. And I will also say, if you want to kind of go from here to here to here to here to here, salary rise quite quickly, sometimes you will need to leave, right? And not always, but sometimes you do need to leave. And you might say, I've got the best team, I've got the best company. That's cool. But just know that if you're wanting to make fairly massive, like punchy jumps, sometimes you've got to leave. Especially if you started as a junior or an intern or a cadet, there's sometimes a perception issue as well. They think you're kind of the little person in the corner and they forget that you've been there for 7 years and you're actually a big contributor to the business now. So sometimes it will take another job offer or for you to start talking to recruiters and external companies to sort of appreciate what your true value in market is. More questions coming through here. Is it awkward to ask for a salary range that your boss might be in? I mean, potentially, but if you don't ask, you don't get. I also have a client and she is the boss and one of her direct reports makes more money than she does. So I've seen it go both ways. If you can justify it, then you're within your rights to ask the question. And it's probably easier to do that if you're not negotiating with your boss directly. You may be negotiating with HR or a more senior leader, but you can ask. They can say, no, you don't know necessarily what they're earning. So you can plead ignorance, even if you do know, so there's ways that you can kind of handle that as well. But yes, sometimes it is time to move to a different company. Okay, so tactfully approaching employers about a salary and will they beat it? I think honesty is the best policy. If you're genuinely thinking about taking it, and honestly, even if you don't want to take it, I would let your boss know. I tell you why. You want your boss to know that you are hot property, right? Because things that are hot property get very well looked after, and you want to be that person. So this has happened to me before. I was offered a job at another global network. I was at a job that I actually really didn't want to leave. It was pretty chill. It's pretty good work, pretty good pay. So I just say, hey, I just put a time aside with my boss. I was like, hey, can we have a catch up? Whatever. And then I said, hey, listen, I just want to be fully transparent with you. I've had an unsolicited job offer. I wasn't looking, but someone sent me an email and made a connection. And I found myself in this situation where I've now had a job offer. It's really interesting work. And it's honestly quite interesting. I'd prefer to stay here though, if I'm honest. I love the team. I love what we're building. So I just wanted to have a really frank conversation and let you know that they've offered me $20,000 more. And I just wanted to put that on the table and let you know. And that's it. And then let's stop talking. We're going to shut up at that point and we're going to see what they say. And they might say, well, you should take that offer then. That sounds like a lot of money. Or they might say, we really don't want you to go. We'd love you to stay, but we can't match it. And, go with our blessing if that's the decision you want to take. Or they might say, leave it with me. I'll talk to finance and I'll come back to you. That's what happened to me. He said, leave it with me. I wasn't really honestly going to take it. Don't tell anyone. But I wanted him to know, because I wanted him to know that he was lucky to have me. And I wanted him to kind of I wanted a raise. Like I wanted more money. And I got it. So I think, some bosses personality wise hate the thought of you kind of being out there looking. And so that's why I would use language to say, I just want to be really transparent. I did not seek this opportunity out, if that's true. If that's not true, you can just leave that part out. You can just say, hey, listen, I've had a job offer And I just wanted to bring it to you because I really value you and respect you as a leader. And I wanted to be really honest with you. You know, I don't want to go behind your back. That's not what this is about. I just wanted to be really upfront, and I just wanted to let you know this is what's happened. This is the situation. I just wanted to have a conversation, and just leave it as an open conversation, see what they say. And then you can decide how you want to handle that in the moment as well.
And one thing I've heard about that situation as well is that you really do have to be prepared to leave if they say no. You can't like bluff your way through, even if like your preference is to stay. You have to be willing to leave, because now if they say, no, we can't do anything, and you say, well, never mind, I'll stay, that's not an ideal situation for sure.
Yeah, because you don't want to be bluffing, because then it's that kind of aggressive, like, oh, I've got an offer, are you going to beat it or what? Like, if that's your vibe, you can do it that way. I don't necessarily think that's going to be the best long-term approach for you, that person, because, it's a small world, and you might hate your boss, and you might be like, I'm just going to like go like this on the way out. But the thing is, you just never know. They might quit and be your big boss at the other company. You just don't know. So I know it's hard, but we really don't want to burn too many bridges if we can avoid it. And just a comment as well, Becca, Nikki is a total baller and has left her company twice, and she's back for the third time and has had $100,000 bump than when she started 7 years ago. And I guess, Nikki, that's that process of you leave, they poach you back, you leave, they poach you back, right? And that's how you can kind of get those significant jumps. Congratulations. Is the best thing to hop around? It depends. Like, some people don't want to hop around. They're quite happy to earn a little bit less money to be in a job in a company that they love. And sometimes you've got an amazing manager who you don't want to leave, right? And so you don't have to hop around. If you're very, very, very motivated by money and you have a target and you want to get there, then you might get there quicker if you hop. You don't want to hop too quickly, because then people will think that you're flaky. So it's a bit of a fine balance, but that's kind of something you've got to weigh up. It's also stressful changing jobs. It might suck at the other place, and it's kind of stressful, and you got to get to know everyone. What's that?
Next week, don't tell me that.
Well, I know where you're going. I've got a good friend there and she loves it. So I'm comfortable that you're going to love it. But, these are the risk factors that you weigh up. You might have your best friends at the company. So, you've ultimately got to go with where the work is going to suit you and align with your values. But again, sometimes there's a season where you're all about the money, and sometimes that's an option. Sometimes you can jump within the company. So the woman I mentioned earlier who got dressed up and felt very confident, she's moving within the business, the same organization, just a different department who's got more budget. So that's always an option too, to think about it. Nikki says companies are not loyal. Ultimately, you got to do what's right for you and your family, I think.
Totally. I've heard be loyal to managers, but don't be loyal to companies. So, if you find a manager that is the best, you follow them wherever they go, but the company itself will replace you.
Yeah. Tam has asked me, how long did I stay with the company after I got that raise? I think I stayed for maybe another 1 year or 18 months. I stayed with the company for another 3 or 4 years, but in that particular show, I only stayed for maybe another year. Yeah, if you leave, it's not awkward. That's life, right? People move on. They get other opportunities. You don't want to get a massive raise and then maybe quit 2 weeks later. You can, but you might just burn a bridge. So, and sometimes life happens. A parent might get sick and you have to leave. And bosses understand that too, right? Life does happen. So everything's sort of circumstantial too. Yeah. Really great questions coming through too. Becca, there's a question here that you might have an answer for. Was there any red flags that you noticed about the culture when you were interviewing for jobs?
Honestly, I was mostly applying to pretty well-known companies, so I kind of knew what to look out for. But I know one person asked me if I was good at setting my own boundaries, which to me means long hours, and you have to decide when you're going to stop and how much you can take. That was kind of the vibe that I got. So, saying they're if you need to block off your calendar for picking up your kids, that's fine. But, you have to learn to set your own boundaries. So that sort of messaging, I think, was a red flag, not in terms of salary, but just in terms of, work-life balance. because I'm all about that life of the work life part. Yeah. But I don't think I saw anything else. I mean, I honestly was concerned with the offer I ended up taking. Like, I thought there was kind of a red flag in the range that they gave me in the very first recruiter conversation that I had, but not enough to, pull out of the process. And I'm glad I didn't. Like, I'll tell you, like, the range that they gave me, I think they were mostly talking base salary, but like all in, the package ended up being significantly more than that when you factor in like equity and things like that. So it was like a red flag. It was a pink flag. It wasn't red, but nothing worth stopping over. And I'm very glad that I did it.
I'm so excited for you. I'm excited for you to have a couple of days off, and I'm really excited for your next role. It's going to be so fun.
Today was my first day off. I didn't know what to do with myself all day. Tomorrow, it's going to be crazy.
If you have Apple TV, I can recommend season 2 of The Morning Show.
Oh, I
It
haven't
is.
Season 1. That's the awesome to do.
Oh my gosh, season 1's amazing. If you need some, it's not trash. It's like actually quite good quality. The Morning Show, it's so good. It's on Apple TV though, and I know not everyone has that. I got it for free with my laptop, actually. Side note. But I know, Becca, you're all about the deal. So
all about coordinating.
Yeah.
Collaborating with our memberships. So I'll leave it at that.
Definitely. Ted Lasso. Avery's giving a shout out to Ted Lasso, also an excellent show. This has been so fun. I'm just so excited to have met everyone, Becca. Like, I love your community. I'm so excited for everyone here to like crush their careers this year and next, of course. So please, like, make sure that you keep both of us in the loop of what happens. Did you find anything out about your H-1B visa? Like, in terms of looking at the data and how that compares to your salary? I'm excited for everyone.
I'm excited too. It seems like everybody else is also excited. Lots of positive feedback. But yeah, like when we talked, I was just so excited to do this together, and you're so motivating. I can't even take it. Like, you could tell me to do anything and I would probably do it, which is you have scary power.
Don't believe the hype, Becca. And likewise, I'm just like, every time I'm like, oh yeah, I should declutter. Yeah, I'm going to use the face gel. Yes, I know it's expensive. I'm worth it. So I'm like loving your stories, and I'm just excited to stay in touch. Make sure you check out Becca's program. Honestly, it's life-changing, and it's the sort of thing that I wish that I'd done when I was at high school, frankly. There we go, Becca. There's another idea. Maybe you should like get your program into high schools, but didn't do that. So the next best time is now, and excited to see a heap of the community in the career challenge next week too, so that you all ace your reviews. If you ace your review, you're going to get a raise or a promotion. So we love to see that.
Totally. And don't forget to follow both Meggie on her account and PepTalkHer as well.
Yeah, and we'll send you a recording. Feel free to share it with friends and whatever. And we just want to pay forward this message, and we're just so excited for all of your successes. It's going to be fun.
Totally. Yeah. Thank you guys so much for joining.
Thanks, everyone. Have an awesome evening, day, wherever you are in the world, and we will hopefully we'll see you on another masterclass soon. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.
Bye.